Good day, everyone. Did you know that Rizal's intent for publishing his annotated version of the Morga Successus de las Islas Filipinas was not only to provide the Filipino people their early history, a pre-Spanish history, but to present to them our own authentic culture and identity. We are the Group 6 and we will discuss the annotation of Antonio Morga's Successus de las Islas Filipinas. First, let's get to know who's Antonio de Morga. Dr. Antonio de Morga was a Spanish conquistador, a lawyer, and a government official for 43 years in the Philippines, New Spain, and Peru. As a deputy governor in the country, he reinstated the audiencia, taking over the function of judge or oidor. He was also in command of the Spanish ships in a 1,600 naval battle against Dutch corsairs, but he suffered a defeat and barely survived. He may have undergone important failures in both his military and political capacities, but he is now remembered for his work as a historian. He authored the book Successus de las Islas Filipinas in 1609 after being reassigned to Mexico. Successus de las Islas Filipinas. This book narrates observations about the Filipino and the Philippines from the perspective of the Spaniards. In fact, this book is considered valuable in the sense that it reflects the first formal record of the earliest days of the Philippines as a Spanish colony. Morga's work, which is based partly on documentary research, keen observation, and partly on his personal involvement and knowledge. It is also said to be the best account of Spanish colonialism in the country. Morga wrote that the purpose for writing Successus was so he could chronicle the deeds achieved by our Spaniards, the discovery, conquest, and conversion of the Filipinas Islands, as well as various fortunes that they have from time to time in the great kingdoms and among the pagan people surrounding the islands. And this is what led Jose Rizal to Morga's work, because Rizal was an earnest seeker of the truth, and this marked him as a historian. He had a burning desire to know exactly the condition of the Philippines when the Spaniards came ashore to the islands. His theory was that the country was economically self-sufficient and prosperous, entertained the idea that it had a lively and vigorous community. He also believed the conquest of the Spaniards contributed in part to the decline of the Philippines' rich traditions and culture. And also, he then decided to undertake the annotation of Antonio de Morga Successus de las Islas Filipinas. And his personal friendship with Ferdinand Blumentritt provided the inspiration for doing a new edition of the Morga Successus. The work consists of 8 chapters. The first 7 chapters underscore the accomplishments of the different governor or generals assigned in the Philippines. The last chapter, which is the chapter 8, contains a brief summary and account of the nature of these regions, their inhabitants, the manner of governing and converting them, and the other details. So indeed, Morga's work or Morga's book is written in the true historic spirit, which has a special value. Its various threads of the history of the islands are followed systematically. This includes political, social, and economic phases of life. Morga Successus vividly portrayed the natives and their conquerors, the futility of the Spanish policy in making extra expeditions, the consequent neglect of internal affairs, the Great Chinese Question, the growth of trade, communication with Japan, missionary movements from the islands to surrounding countries, the jealous and envious opposition of the Portuguese, and the dangers of sea voyages.
Now let's go to Rizal's objectives. First is to awaken the consciousness of the Filipinos regarding the glorious ways of the past. Second is to correct what has been distorted about the Philippines due to Spanish conquest. Third, to prove that the Filipinos are civilized before the coming of the Spaniards. And now let us all know, how did Jose Rizal know about Morga's work? First and foremost, Rizal found the book while he was in London at the British Museum's reading room. We all know naman that our national hero loves reading books. Second, he hand-copied the whole 351 pages of the book and annotated every chapter of it. The third is it was the first historical work in the Philippines by a Filipino. It is the first history written from the point of view of the colonized, not the colonizer. Overall, Rizal explains in his introduction to Morga that he got the inspiration while he was working on the Noli Me Tangere, that is, by depicting the actual situation of the Philippines. The very influence of the Noli Me Tangere convinced him that it was necessary to know the past fully in order to understand the present. Which is tama nga naman si Dr. Jose Rizal na dapat muna nating alamin ang nakaraan upang lubos nating maunawaan ang kasalukuyan. Now, let's answer the question why Jose Rizal chose Morga's work. Why not others? One of his reasons are Morga, compared to religious chronicles, was more sympathetic to the Indios. When we say sympathetic, in Tagalog term, it is nakikiramay, naaawa, or simpatya. The second is Morga was not only an eyewitness but a major actor in the events he narrates. It only means that Morga's work or Morga's book is based on his true experience. And the third reason why Jose Rizal chose Morga's work is Rizal felt Morga to be more objective than the religious writers whose accounts included many miracle stories. When we say objective, in Tagalog it is layunin. And overall, the main reason why Jose Rizal chose Morga's work, he had wanted to prove by a reputable work that the people of the Philippines did possess a high level of culture and morality before the arrival of Spaniards, did have mastery of distinct handicraft art, or as perhaps in ship construction, did develop a flourishing trade, and did maintain a good contact. Indeed, gusto lang naman ng patunayan ni Jose Rizal na ang Pilipinas noon ay isang masaganang bansa at mayaman sa kultura bago pa man dumating ang mga Espanyol.
Rizal's annotation. The people of the Philippines had a culture in their own before the coming of the Spaniards. The Philippines has a long and rich history that includes ASEAN, European, and American influences. The Filipinos had a rich culture and were traders with the Chinese and Japanese before the Spanish annexation in 1521. Farmers were farming stable crops on a physical level. Filipinos are also considered as fun and loving people. Second one is, the Filipino in pre-Hispanic Philippines are advanced, has high literacy rate, self-sufficient, and has smooth foreign relations. During the pre-Hispanic Philippines, people has a high literacy rate, means they have an effective primary education system and literacy programs that have enabled a significant section of the population to learn to read and write. People's internal locus of control is quite powerful. The Philippines also has good foreign relations, allowing them to work together, pool resources, and exchange information to address global concerns that affect everyone, not just one country or region. Next one is, Filipinos were decimated, demoralized, exploited, and ruined by the Spanish colonization. Rizal's observation and perspectives on our country's pre-colonial days are fascinating. He emphasized that the Spanish colonialism decimated Filipinos, meaning they were destroyed or severely damaged, demoralized, or morally degraded. The Spanish colonization exploited and ruined them. He is implying that the Philippines' current situation is not necessarily superior to its past. For Rizal's annotation, the present state of the Philippines was not necessarily superior to its past. He included that the colonial history of the Philippines being in prolonged periods of distress that many people have been exposed to. The last one is, the Philippines was depopulated, impoverished and retorted, astounded by metaphor, with no confidence in their past, still without faith in her present, and without faltering hope in the future. To convey it to us Filipinos, the image that the Spanish occupation has brutally damaged our culture and tradition. Wherever we look, we can see traces of their stay here in our country, and that can no longer to change. Now let's talk about Ferdinand Blumentritt Philog, to Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Ferdinand Blumentritt Philog, writing in Spanish instead of his native German language. He encouraged Rizal to write about the Philippine pre-colonial history. Blumentritt praised Rizal's work as scholarly and well thought out. He noted that Morga's Sucesos was so rare that the very few libraries have guarded with the same solicitude with it were the treasure of the Incas. Now let's talk about Blumentritt criticized Rizal's explanation on two accounts. So, first one is, he noticed that Rizal had committed the mistakes of many historians who judge events in the past in the context of contemporary ideas and more. And the second one is, he said that Rizal shouldn't condemn Catholicism even though they didn't do any effort to suppress calls for reform. He should just keep the critic about religious orders in the Philippines.
That's all for today's discussion. I hope you learned how important it is to analyze other people's work in the past in order to gain deeper understanding of our nation, with anticipation that you too may write a reliable historical fact of the Philippines.